The road to a $20,000 XRP involves privacy, said Chad Steingraber from the XRP community. Ripple just dropped a new update about privacy. We also have some reactions from Crypto Eerie and some other content creators in the XRP space. We need to go through what all of this means. We plus have some new clips from Phil Quac about Ripple, XRP, and RLUSD. We're going to get into that and so much more in this video. Let's get into this. Ripple X Dev dropped this. Without privacy, financial institutions cannot safely use public ledgers. Without accountability, regulators cannot sign off. With programmable privacy, we can do both. Meet Jay Oyokinyele, yikes, cryptographer of Ripple X, senior director of engineering, and his insights. So let's just take a look at what this gentleman is saying. He's got a PhD in computer science from Johns Hopkins University, and he spent more than a decade advancing privacy-preserving technologies for blockchain and beyond. As a senior director of engineering at Ripple, he is focused on bringing privacy, scale, and institutional-grade infrastructure to the XRP ledger. As blockchain enters its next chapter, one defined by institutional adoption and real-world impact, the question is no longer if financial systems will move on chain, but how. Institutions need infrastructure that is scalable, compliant, and trustworthy without losing sight of decentralization and neutrality that make public blockchains valuable in the first place. At the heart of this transformation lies a paradox. Finance cannot function without confidentiality. Yet blockchains are built on transparency. The challenge, and indeed the opportunity, is to design systems that reconcile these two truths. Why privacy must be native to blockchain finance. There is a misconception that privacy in blockchain is synonymous with secrecy for bad actors. In reality, privacy is about giving honest participants control over what is revealed and to whom and under what circumstances. In traditional finance, nobody would dare log into their bank without a security of HTTPS. On blockchains, many still transact without the same baseline protections. Today, privacy often depends on intermediaries like exchanges to break the link between a user's wallet and their identity. If those intermediaries are hacked, privacy collapses. Cryptography gives us a better way. Programmable privacy through techniques like zero-knowledge proofs, also known as ZKPs, lets institutions transact confidently while still meeting regulatory requirements through selective disclosure. This balance is essential. Without privacy, financial institutions cannot safely use public ledgers for core workflows. Without accountability, regulators cannot sign off. Without programmable privacy, we have both. It does talk about lessons and a few other things here. Scaling without sacrificing trust. Blockchain has long wrestled with the trilemma: scale, scrutiny, and decentralization. Pick two. Many fast chains achieve throughput by cutting corners on trust. The result: hacks, forks, centralization. We must do better. ZKPs and confidential computing point the way. This will set up for fair ordering. Trusted execution environments, also known as TEEs, can enforce tamper-proof transaction ordering amongst validators, mitigating front-running and MEV attacks that restores confidence to markets. Confidential computation, enclaves that allow sensitive logic to run privately off-chain while still producing verifiable outputs. These balances speed with confidentiality and combination institutions require. Selective disclosure, ZKPs let institutions prove adherence to compliance requirements. Example is KYC or AML without revealing sensitive transaction data. Example here is when you're sending a payment globally, sometimes banks have to verify who's sending the payment, so they need your personal information. What if you could send that payment globally without providing all of that privacy information up front, but they can verify who is sending the transaction before it goes out? So your private information, like who you are, your bank account information, how much of your balance is, things like that, won't be shown to maybe bad actors in the chain. Talks about cross-chain security. ZK-like clients can help validate events that take place on a blockchain for one another without relying on centralized parties. So why Ripple? Why now? My decision to join Ripple is shaped three factors that together create a rare opportunity in blockchain technology. The people and the moment were right. So interesting that Ripple does is able to bring on some of the most talented people globally. Crypto Eerie chimes in here, programmable privacy coming to the XRP ledger, meaning there are technologies like zero knowledge proof snarks, trusted execution environments, also known as TEEs, and fully homomorphic encryption. This enables private DeFi with token transfers while maintaining compliant verifiability. Krypton Ritter also chimes in and says, in time where I believe we're losing the fight to privacy to AI, the governments on Earth and many too big to fail tech companies that own basically every single aspect of our lives, it's pretty refreshing to read that there is a path forward for the XRP ledger that makes sense. And Chad Steingraber highlights his post from 2022 here. This is where it gets really interesting because the road to 20K XRP involves privacy. They've been very clear and honest with us. XRP was never meant for public retail trading. We were the pitchers in warm-up practice before the game begins, ready for the big league. And so just to get some more understanding here of how this could mean $20,000, privacy enhancements on the XRP ledger are being positioned as fundamental catalysts that could enable XRP to reach transformative price levels such as 20,000 by unleashing institutional adoption and fundamentally shifting supply dynamics. Institutional finance requires the ability to transact, lend, and tokenize assets while maintaining confidentiality, regulatory compliance, and auditability. The XRP Ledger roadmap now emphasizes programmable privacy through tools like confidential multi-purpose tokens, leveraging zero-knowledge proofs, and optional audit keys. These allow financial institutions to prove compliance, KYC reserves, obligations without exposing sensitive data, enabling use of public blockchains for high value flow. Chad Steingraber's 20,000 price thesis requires three pillars. Institutions can tokenize assets such as bonds, stablecoins, and real-world assets and settle them securely on the XRP ledger with privacy shielding internal positions from competitors and adversaries. This is actually really interesting. You don't see a whole lot of blockchains going down this path and having these abilities that Ripple and their team are solving at scale. XRP transitions from a widely traded retail asset to an institutional reserve held by banks and custodians backing tokenized assets for cross-border payment flows. The utility and settlement requirements multiply demand while privacy features encourage reserve accumulation over open trading. Institutional participants absorb XRP supply, removing it from public exchanges and locking it on private and permission ledgers. As public access shrinks, any remaining circulating supply faces dramatic scarcity. The supply shock could amplify price far beyond previous speculative highs, especially if programmable privacy makes XRP Ledger the default choice for regulated global settlement. Key privacy features being built, confidential and multi-purpose tokens. We just saw that launch. High transaction amount enables selective audit, supported tokenized real-world assets and lending activities. Firewall amendments, transaction controls for risk mitigation, daily caps, and whitelisting appeals for both retail and enterprise security. Zero knowledge proofs allows compliance and regulatory verification without leaking non-essential transaction data. And permission domains, decentralized identifiers, and audit keys secure identity and selective transparency for regulators and its participants. All right, here is Phil Quac.
Background before I got back into crypto, started off in crypto in 2013. It was very anarchical. A lot of people were like, this is going to be a completely different system. This is going to be something which is going to usurp all of the current systems. And then, I became an attorney in New York, came back to crypto afterwards. And I think at this point in 2025, what we have as a system and what we have as an ecosystem is more along the lines of we've got to work with what we already have. And I think Chris Larsen of Ripple put it really nicely. He said that every technological revolution hasn't necessarily completely reinvented the wheel. It's built off the back of what's come before. And so I think precisely to your point, yes, we have new tech. We have new technologies, we have stablecoins, we have AI, but at the same time, there are certain principles which are tried and tested, and we've got to build on, even though we have these new technologies available to us.
All right, another clip here from the same interview.
So let me follow up to that for a moment here. What are some of the key advantages of using stablecoins over traditional fiat or other types of crypto?
That's a great question. Number one is this cheapness with which you can transfer. So for example, if you transfer a stablecoin like RLUSD, which is issued by Ripple, then on the XRP ledger, you can transfer that for literally fractions of a cent. Super fast, and super cheap as well. When we look at the cost of a wire transfer, I'll give you an example. We recently ran a prize competition for our community, and some of the prizes were very, very small, just as guaranteed prizes. We sent $10 to one participant. It actually cost her $5 to receive it, because that was the price. It was a $15 wire transfer. So she actually lost $5 because we sent her 10. So absolutely insane. That's just one example of how stablecoins are making it a lot faster and a lot cheaper to receive and send.
All right, let's keep it going here. There's a few other things. Looks like UC Berkeley plus Ripple using RLUSD, a $1.3 million gift from Ripple, launches new Berkeley Center for Digital Assets. UC Berkeley's College of Engineering is launching a new research center that will leverage blockchain and digital twin technologies in order to reimagine how physical assets are captured, valued, and verified and exchanged in the digital world. Ripple's University Blockchain Research Initiative is providing the foundational funding for this new chapter, digital asset chapter here, 1.3 million in RLUSD. And then also, I thought this was interesting just to end the video here. Cardano founder explains why in 3 to 5 years we're taking over the world. I just thought this was fun. Let's end it here.
So you're talking about a coexistence between traditional finance and what we have right now, what you represent. I just had a conversation with Vlad Tenev of Robinhood. He talks about how cryptocurrencies will be the backbone of the financial system. Will it be?
I think so. I mean, tokens are like financial stem cells. They could be heart cells and brain cells, and so they can be securities or commodities or currencies or intellectual property. And having T0 24/7 global settlement with full programmability is a really powerful thing. The only thing we're missing is selective disclosure and rational privacy. You need to have the ability to do private smart contracts to sort out the private side from the public side, and that's where the industry's at right now, solving that last mile problem. Once you have it, you can pull everything together, and then you can be a superset to broker dealers and superset to custodians and all this other stuff that runs the legacy world. And at that point, there's no reason to run on the legacy systems. You want to run the crypto systems because there's far more liquidity.
And when will that happen?
Within the next 3 to 5 years. And the big challenge was regulation, but the regulation's getting done. You know, Clarity Act will probably be passed in October, and then it'll be about 2 to 3 years of rulemaking between the SEC and the CFTC, and then every jurisdiction, the MiCA framework in Europe or Abu Dhabi or here the Singapore Monetary Authority, will have to be interoperable with that financial set. And it's not going to just talk about tokens, it's going to talk about securities laws and taxes and custodial standards, and then we as an industry can adapt our software accordingly, and then all the securities will enter in. That's $10 trillion on the blockchain space, and then, you know, everything else is the sky's the limit. So we've basically
everything else, the sky's the limit. Listen, I've been buying ADA since it was about 50, 60 cents. You can do whatever you want with your life and your world, but I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.